So you ever fished at North Park before?
I have not.
All right.
I'm looking forward to it.
First timer. Yeah, I think I'll sit on the right side.
Works for me.
All right, Burke, let's throw a couple casts in and see what we can come up with here. So I know the season ended a little bit earlier than you guys obviously envisioned or wanted it to, but what have you been up to since things wrapped up?
Well, we had our amateur and our pro meetings, so we're getting ready for the draft and getting ready for free agency. So we had 4 days of meetings with the amateur guys and 3 days of meetings with the pro guys. So trying to sign a couple guys, obviously.
Yeah.
And, so it's really, the work never stops. It's just, it changes. The emphasis changes. I always laugh when people say, what's the off season like? And I'm like, there is no off season. So we've been doing all the work that teams do that once they're eliminated from the playoffs. We had hoped to play a little longer than we did. We're disappointed that we didn't, but the work doesn't change. It doesn't stop.
It's interesting too, because I remember a lot of times last year, Burke, you would say, as far as the Penguins were concerned in the off season, that you guys went shopping at Kmart on the discount rack. I love that description, but I think you guys hit a few times, it's fair to say too, when you look at what you did last year as far as Danton Heinen and Brock McGinn and Brian Boyle and bringing back Evan Rodriguez. This year, as I mentioned, you know, there's the money there, obviously, but there's also some decisions to make. We're casting right here. Do you guys feel like you're putting your best bait in the water as far as action is concerned this year? And where do you feel like you're operating from in that aspect?
Well, we've got to figure out the two big guys. We got to figure out where Chris Letang ends up and where Evgeny Malkin ends up. I got a bite here.
All right, there we go.
Yeah, let's see.
Some action.
Yeah.
Right when we're talking about Evgeny Malkin and Chris Letang, there's action. Is this a sign?
He's not that, I don't think he's very big. See if I hooked him yet. No.
Oh, did he get you?
He might have. I wrapped that worm pretty tight. Yeah, he's still there. So yeah, so we gotta figure out what we do with the two big guys, and that's, you know, been a prolonged process. It's not a simple thing, but our cap situation is much clearer once we know where those two are going, if they're coming back or not, and that's really been a priority in terms of, you know, where we spend our dollars other than on the two big guys.
I have a lot of hockey questions for you, but we are fishing, and I know that that's a big part of one of your passions away from the rink is just being in the outdoors and hunting and fishing. But fishing-wise, I mean, is there a standout catch that you've had? I remember reading your book. You had a couple that you talked about there.
Well, I went to Langara, I guess 3 years ago, right before the pandemic shut us down. I took Jeff Sanderson, who had played for me in Hartford and played for me in Vancouver. And he caught a 77-pound Chinook, which is a monster fish.
It's a monster.
This fish hit the bait, hit the herring, and screamed out 100 meters of line. Just it jumped out of the water twice. It went about 4 feet in the air. That's the first time I realized how big it was. So it took off 100 meters of line, we got the line back, and then it jumped 4 feet out of the water, and then we were like, holy cow, that's a big salmon. Sandy got it in, we took some pictures and released it, because really, you want those big fish to run a river and have babies. You know, that's the key, is that they got to get up a river. So we released that fish, and but I've caught a 45-pounder, 44 and a half, I think it was. Caught many fish in the low 40s and high 30s, so it's a great place to fish. There's lots of fish.
That's really cool. Do you ever get a kind of a satisfaction from it? I know I do, just this kind of scene where it's quiet, just you in the water.
One of the great things about fishing and hunting is the early mornings.
Yeah.
So you get up and you're setting out duck decoys at 5:30 in the morning, and the sun's just coming up in the east. Birds start to fly and start to sing, and it's just a magical time. The early morning is one of the best parts about fishing and about hunting. The social aspect of fishing is fun. You know, like I like going with a bunch of guys and drinking some beer and catching some fish.
Just had to settle for coffee this morning, unfortunately.
Yeah,
I tried to pull some strings for you, but
that's quite all right.
Surprised it's quiet. I thought we'd have a little bit more action here, but I guess that's the beauty of fishing sometimes.
That's what they call it, fishing.
Yeah, it's true. You've been here a couple of years now, Burke. I know when we first met, it was right in the middle of the pandemic and everything was virtual. In fact, we were doing the GM show virtual at that time, and now obviously things have changed and you're around the players more. You can talk to these guys, you can kind of get a feel for them a little bit better than you would have a year and a half ago. I mean, what's it been like now, just totally assimilated into this role and having your regular routine, so to speak?
Yeah, and I think that's important. I think that relationship with your players is critical. I've always prided myself on having a good relationship with my players, and not being around them, that was really a casualty of how you want a team to run. You know the players well, you know their wives' names, you know their kids' names. And I missed that. That's a part of the pandemic that I did not enjoy, not being around the players.
What about just Pittsburgh in general? I mean, I know that you weren't unfamiliar with the city or the organization, but now being able to do this, you know, go around, see the restaurants, see the bars, all that kind of stuff, I would assume a little bit more than you could have a year ago at this time.
Yeah, we didn't get to do much, obviously. In the pandemic, we didn't do anything. We were locked down initially. And even the second season here, we were in a mini lockdown. We weren't locked down like as tight as the rest of Pittsburgh, but we were specifically prohibited from going to restaurants or bars. So the first season and a half, there wasn't much interaction, but it's much better now. I have been able to go to a bunch of restaurants and a couple of bars. And I mean, I've always liked Pittsburgh, but now I love Pittsburgh. You know, it's been great living here. It's fantastic. I live in the Strip District. And it's about a 4-minute drive to work in the morning, and if I go to Cranberry, it's 25 minutes, and it's been wonderful. It's a really, you know, working for David Morehouse was a great privilege, and working for Ron Burke and Mario, and now the Fenway guys have taken over, and they seem like really sharp, nice people. It's been really enjoyable working with them and learning how they do things. So that we're still, you know, feeling each other out and getting to know each other.
Sure.
But I've certainly enjoyed it so far.
Yeah, you mentioned Fenway. I did want to ask you about that because I think it's interesting with them coming on board, and all we know is their brand essentially from the outside perspective before they became a part of the Penguins family, that Liverpool, the Boston Red Sox, I mean, you think about those organizations, you think about success, you think, I mean, especially in the sense of Liverpool recently, championships. Red Sox obviously have won their fair share. To now be associated with that, as you mentioned, meeting the guys, I mean, what's that whole experience been like?
Well, just met senior management. We haven't interacted with the ball players much. We went to a function at Fenway Park and sat in a suite at Fenway, which was cool. But I'm going to spend some time with them. The Red Sox are in Toronto for 3 games, and I'm going to go in and spend those 3 nights and meet the guys that run the baseball team. So I'm looking forward to that very much.
You have some New England roots. I know you worked in Toronto, but where your allegiances lie as far as the baseball? Is it the Red Sox? Is that your team?
Well, you know what's funny? When you work for a team, I remember the very first day, you go to work for a team, and as soon as you go to work for that team, that's your team.
Yeah.
And you live and breathe, and you wake up thinking about it, and that's what happens when you go to work for a team. So I am a Red Sox fan. I follow the scores. They've been battling back in the standings. I follow Liverpool. I'm not a huge soccer fan, but I'm learning. And Liverpool has had success, and the Red Sox have had success, and we've had success. So it's cool being a part of that organization. I have not been involved like that before. Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment owns several teams. They own the Raptors and they own Toronto FC, but this is a little bigger scale than that.
Yeah, definitely. You think you'll get any one-on-one time with LeBron?
I don't know, I'd like to. It'd be an honor. I met him when he was a rookie. We were playing in Phoenix, and they were there his rookie year, and he said hello to me outside, very polite.
Yeah.
And I'm a big man. And
you are?
I'm 6'2". And I met LeBron, and he towered over me, and his shoulders are about twice as wide as mine. I'm like, good Lord, this guy's a basketball player. So yeah, it'd be an honor to meet him at some point. That'd be great.
Yeah, I saw he got an up close and personal view the other day of the Stanley Cup, and he looked like he was pretty impressed by it. How could you not be, right? But
yeah, it's amazing to watch people interact with the Stanley Cup that haven't been around it before.
Right.
It's the coolest trophy. Having won a cup, there is no feeling like it, and I know exactly what Sully and those guys experienced in Pittsburgh because I've done it.
Yeah.
and the work that goes into it, and the sweat that goes into it, and the worry that goes into it. And I remember we won the Cup in '07 in Anaheim, and I remember the next day, the NHL asked me to take the Stanley Cup to Camp Pendleton and meet some wounded warriors. And it was like, carry that cup in to show these soldiers, these guys that are suffering from serious wounds and PTSD, and watch these guys find their names on the cup from their favorite teams and everything. It was really, and I took the Stanley Cup to, I went with the Stanley Cup to Kandahar too in Afghanistan. So I've been fortunate to not only have the cup for a couple days here and there, but also to be involved with it with the Canadian forces in Afghanistan and with the U.S. forces at Camp Pendleton near San Diego. So that's the coolest part of it, is watching. I remember at my Stanley Cup party, it was in Vancouver, and Gordie Howe, he passed away a couple years ago, but Gordie Howe walked in. I didn't know he was coming. So Gordie Howe comes in, and I always called him Mr. Howe. I never called him Gordie. And he walks in. He didn't tell me he was coming. He said, "Am I welcome in here?" I said, "Mr. Howe, you can stay as long as you want." And I got to sit and talk to him and drink a couple of beers for half an hour, just the two of us. It was awesome.
So this off season, we mentioned with, you obviously signed Brian Rust. You got a big piece out of the way there. You talked about just the decisions that have to be made with Gino and Chris Letang. But as far as the draft is concerned, it's a little unique in the sense that you guys have a first-round pick, and I know that you and Ron Hextall were pretty adamant in trying to hang on to that and not move it at the deadline, and you now have the 21st overall pick to work with. How does that change the next couple of weeks, just knowing that you're going to have somebody draft pretty highly, unlike the last couple of seasons?
We've had one first-round pick in 7 years, I believe.
Yeah.
And that's a testament to winning the Cup and trying to win the Cup. You know, like with Jimmy Rutherford's efforts, moving picks to try and win again. And that's what it's all about. And that's where teams expend a lot of assets to try to win. If you look at the number, I always joke about this on TV and say, I checked with the league again, they're only giving one Cup this year. But if you look at the assets that were expended by teams trying to win the Cup, it's staggering. And we did the deal to acquire Rickard Rakell, and that was Hexy's one thing. He said, I'll give up significant assets, and we did, to get Rickard Rakell, but we're not giving up our first. So we have the 21st pick. It's an interesting draft because there are a bunch of teams with multiple first and second round picks.
Right.
So it might be something where we can leverage those into more assets, but if not, we've had our meetings, we've got our list, we're ready to go. If it's our turn to pick in Montreal, we're going to pick.
The 21st pick too, I mean, it's not necessarily a spot that I think a lot of people would look at and shy away from, thinking that you're going to get a player that I'm not saying would be in the Penguins lineup next year, but that we could be excited about as a big piece of the future. And maybe that's the beauty of having a first round pick to begin with.
Some drafts are eye-popping, where they say the top 5 guys are this or that, or a generational player. It's not that kind of draft, but we like the players that are there, and we're excited about picking at 21. So if that's what we end up doing, we're ready to go, and we're excited about that. And it will be a guy that we should be able to draft, a guy that play here for a long time, maybe not right away.
Tell me the story. I mean, you mentioned the draft, obviously a little bit of a different setting, but your draft with Anaheim, the Sidney Crosby draft. I know you've joked about now finally having him on your team, but what was that process like when you were that close to nabbing the generational talent, as you said?
I remember the night before the draft, our scouts said, we gotta pick in the top 10, and I'm like, guys, it's a lottery. I don't have any influence. So they kept pulling names out of the hat, and they didn't pull Anaheim, and finally we're down to like the bottom 4, and someone said, we got one of the top 4 picks, and like, okay, that's good. We really liked the draft. We really liked the guys there. And then it got to 2, and I was convinced we were going to get Sidney Crosby. I was convinced of those 2 names, they were going to pick Anaheim and not Pittsburgh. And I walked up there, and I'll never forget, they took a commercial, right? They said it was our turn to pick, and they said, we'll be right back after this. I could have killed the guy on TV. But I don't know why, but I was convinced we were getting Sidney Crosby. So we ended up picking second. We took Bobby Ryan, who's had a fine career and is a great kid. But you know, you get a shot at Sid, and everyone knew about Sid back then. Like, there was no mystery about Sidney Crosby. Everyone knew how special he was going to be right away. And so that was, you know, I had this irrational, I have no reason why I believed we were going to get him, but I did. And so it was, I was disappointed, but still excited because we, you know, that draft, Jack Johnson was in that draft,
Sure.
Carey Price was in that draft. So we were excited about Bobby Ryan and having a chance to add him to our team.
It's interesting with that kind of a setup too. I mean, did you do anything for good luck? I mean, obviously you didn't get the first overall pick, but were you doing anything to kind of improve your odds there?
Yeah, I think hockey people are superstitious as a rule.
Maybe, yeah.
And I'm no different at the draft, and I'll do this on when we pick in Montreal. I have this packet of good luck charms that I'll bring to the draft. I have a medal blessed by the Pope. I have two.
Really?
When I did the deal for Chris Pronger in 1993, we did that deal on the floor, and I had 2 loonies in my pocket. And I've kept those loonies ever since we were able to pull off the Pronger deal. And so I had them again when we did the deal for the Sedins, and I'll have them again next week when we go to the draft.
So those are Hall of Fame loonies then?
Hall of Fame loonies, yeah. And there's a dog tag there from my son. The Olympic team in 2010 had dog tags made up for Brendan after he passed away, and I still got that. And yeah, so I am superstitious, but not like crazy like some people, but a little bit.
Like your captain maybe?
Well, it was funny. We acquired Mark Friedman, and I came to the rink one day and someone parked in my space. And so I went to the trainer. I said, some idiot parked in my space. Just find out who it is. So it turns out it was Fried's. He was new. No one told him they were numbered spots, so he parked in my spot. And he comes running out he said, sorry, Burke, give me your keys, I'll move it. I said, Mark, here's the issue. It's not that you're in my spot, it's that you're parked next to Sid and you have the wrong car parked next to Sid. Move the car and I'll put my car there. So we wanted Sid to have everything the way he wanted it. And that was the problem with Mark Friedman. It wasn't that his car was there, it was that my car wasn't there.
That's good. Something's gonna break our way here, Berkey. And if it doesn't, it'll just be like 95% of the times I've gone fishing.
I'm gonna change this worm out after this one. It's kind of beat up.
It's funny you talk about Sid though, and just in hockey circles, how people knew when he was drafted that he was gonna be different, he was gonna be special. How often do you hear stuff like that, but then a guy comes into the league and, I mean, the expectations are just so high and so many people expect so many things. Then you look at what he's been able to do and the cups and the Conn Smythes and, you know, the all-star nods and the trophies, individual trophies that he's won, the team trophies that he's won, the World Cup of Hockey, the Olympic golds. I mean, he's lived up to that. And when you think about what the bar was, it's pretty ridiculous to think about what he's done.
I've been fortunate. I've had some great players.
Yeah.
Drafted Chris Pronger, he's in the Hockey Hall of Fame. Had Mark Messier, he's in the Hockey Hall of Fame. Had Pavel Bure, he's in the Hockey Hall of Fame. But I haven't been around a guy that's had that impact on the game. And to watch the perfection that he tries to achieve as a player, his preparation, his practices, it's just been a privilege and a pleasure to watch.
Do you remember that game in Columbus this year where he got the hat trick and the third goal was an empty net goal and he banked it off the half wall at center ice?
Yes.
Do you think that was intentional?
Yes.
I do too, but he wouldn't admit it.
No, he's a pretty modest guy, but there's no question in my mind that was intentional. Right when it happened, I said to Hexie, I said, did you see what he just did?
Right.
And I'm like, okay, I have a big beef with guys trying to score on empty net goals rather than just chipping it out and letting the clock run out.
Yeah.
So the analytics tell us, no, try to score, and if they, you know, but to me, if you've got time, you should still chip that puck out and kill more clock time. If you ice it, you get a face-off back in your end, your guys are tired, you can't change. So I'm a big believer, and we saw Rusty do it this year a couple times where he had a chance between the blue and the red line to try to score, and he didn't. He chipped it out and let the clock run down. But when Sid did it right away, I'm like, son of a gun, he did that on purpose.
One thing that is coming up this year that should be pretty cool, Berkey, I mean, it's hard to imagine it now, us sitting here in the middle of the summer fishing, but the Winter Classic at Fenway, and you mentioned the Red Sox being your team now. Well, Fenway's obviously our company, and the Penguins are going to get to go there, play at I think you could argue the most historic active ballpark in Major League Baseball, and play outdoors on, I think, January 2nd for the Winter Classic. But just to play that game, to play a team like the Bruins in that kind of a setting, how much are you looking forward to that? I mean, it's going to be a special day.
Well, I've been involved in the game for more than 30 years, and I've never been involved with an outdoor game.
Really? I didn't know
Never.
that, actually. Okay.
Never. So I'm really looking forward to it. I was at the game in Boston in 2010
Yeah.
because we announced the U.S. Olympic team right after the game. So I got to be at the game, was walking around, I was in between the benches. I got to skate with my kids. It was the last time I skated with my son. I got to skate with all my kids. It was fantastic. So I'm really looking forward to being a part of it. I've never, even though I was tangentially involved. And then right after the game, we went out and announced the U.S. Olympic team for 2010, and of course went on to win a silver medal.
Sure.
But I'm really excited about that.
You mentioned your son, and I know that You Can Play has taken on a big foothold, I guess, with the National Hockey League, and you're very involved in that. Oh, did you get a bite there? Oh.
Yeah, nothing.
But how much has that become a part of your identity beyond just being, you know, Brian Burke, the general manager, Brian Burke, the president of hockey ops, Brian Burke, the broadcaster? I mean, You Can Play and everything that Brendan and your family has started with that. How much has that taken a part of your identity as well?
Well, we started the You Can Play project not long after Brendan passed away, and my son Patrick has done way more. I can't take a whole lot of credit for that. My son Patrick has done a whole lot more work in that space than I have. But I have taken on Brendan's cause as my cause. I'm marching on Sunday in the Toronto Pride Parade. I marched in Pittsburgh 2 weeks ago. I've marched in Calgary. I rode a horse in the parade in Calgary.
First time riding a horse or no?
No, not the first time riding a horse, but that poor horse. We mounted for part of the Stampede Parade. We mounted this horse about an hour before the parade started, and the parade was 2 hours long on this poor bloody horse. Oh. He had to sit there for 3.5 hours with me. And then I got off and I could barely walk. Your legs get like stiff, you know, like wood from riding the horse.
Right.
It was ugly, but we made a vow as a family. After Brendan's funeral, we said we have two choices here. We can just sit down and mope,
right,
or we can make a difference. And we said we're going to make sure that Brendan has a legacy, and we've done that. And it's an important part of what I do and what the Penguins do.
I feel like the NHL's a little bit ahead of the other leagues in that department too. And maybe I'm biased because it's the league that I know best, but you just see a lot more and hear a lot more about, you know, You Can Play, the players beyond yourself across many different teams and stuff, being active in the pride parades and being out there and vocally speaking on certain causes. It just seems that it's a little bit different with the NHL.
Well, the NHL has been a great ally of the LGBTQ plus community. They've embraced You Can Play, they've embraced Pride, they do a Pride Month, and it's important that the NHL has a lead role in that.
Refresh my memory, how well did you know Hexy when you guys started here together, and how much do you feel like you guys have grown to know each other and gained maybe a more respect, more friendship with each other over the last couple of years?
I did not know Ron Hextall that well. I knew him to say hi to. I respected him very much as a player. People forget what a dominant player he was. Like, he was a big goalie before there were a lot of big goalies. Yep. He was really athletic. He handled the puck well. He kind of perfected that style of play where you're a big goalie, cover a lot of area, handle the puck extremely well. He was the first goalie to score a goal, obviously. I always liked players that excelled and battled, and I respected them.
Yeah.
So I didn't know him that well, and I've gotten to know him obviously much, much better, and he's just a good guy. He's a thoughtful guy. He's a Manitoba guy.
Yeah, I always get a kick out of him whenever we get to Winnipeg, that he makes sure to let everyone know we're in God's country. As you probably know, or if you don't, Burke, I grew up in Philly. I've shed the orange and black, working with the Penguins, obviously, but Ron Hextall, when I was younger, he was the goalie. And I told him this, but he made the position cool for me. I mean, even before Ryan Miller wore the helmet tilted to the side on his head, I remember Ron Hextall leading the Flyers out for warm-ups with the helmet, a little tilted to the side. He would snap the puck into the back of the net and kind of start things off. He had kind of a swagger, as people talk about that.
He did.
To himself.
He did, and he's a quiet guy. He's a thoughtful guy. When he speaks, he has something to say. He doesn't just chatter away. And since Hexie got here, and some of the deals he's been able to make that and stay cap compliant are just amazing.
Well, Burke, I'll ask you this. I know we're pretty much wrapping up here, I think, but if anyone's looking at the Pittsburgh Penguins and saying, wow, this could be a situation where they might lose a franchise pillar or two, they might be in a position where they look a little bit different on the ice next year, you know, how are they going to still contend? I mean, what do you say to those people, that this team is still going to be able to be towards the top of the league and challenge for a Stanley Cup again?
Well, Fenway has made it very clear to us we're going to be a cap team. So if we don't have those cap dollars to spend on these two players, we'll spend them elsewhere. And we'll try and replace the players that we have to bring in. We're not going to pay more than we think is appropriate.
Sure.
So if that means we lose a guy or two guys, that we're prepared for that, and Fenway Sports Group's prepared for that. But Fenway's made it very clear we're going to be a cap team. So if we don't have money to spend on those two players, we'll spend it elsewhere.
All right. Thanks for fishing with me, Burke. I'm sorry we caught as many fish as NHL goals that I've scored.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Or games I've played in, for that matter.